How are you this beautiful, beautiful Monday morning? I am Marla Renee Stewart here live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram. Welcome to Love, Tips, and Velvet Lips, where I help you with all of your amazing intimacy questions, any questions that you might have. And if you want to, you can put them in the comments as you are viewing this, or you could submit your questions via the anonymous form. So you can just go to qrco.de/lovetipsama, and I will be happy to get your questions done there. So yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful Monday. We are starting the week off. I hope y'all have started the week off yesterday, nicely if you start your weeks on Sunday. I had a nice, Malachi and I went to the museum. We had a really good time and, handled some work and got some home stuff done. So I was feeling very accomplished. I got some writing done. I have a book chapter that's due on Saturday. So I, got some of that done. So that felt really nice. So yeah. All right. So here we go now. Again, if you want to submit your question, you can submit it at qrco.de/lovetipsama. And so this week we are going to be, this month, how we've been talking about, sex after, week 1, we talked about pregnancy and postpartum. Week 2, we talked about being 50 and over and what that looks like. Week 3, we talked about grief. And this is week 4, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Week 4, we are discussing what that looks like after trauma, right? When something happens to you or you have been traumatized in some way, shape, or form, how does your body get back into it, or how does your body receive that when there is trauma? Now, I am not a trauma expert by any means. I am more of a pleasure person. Not to say pleasure and trauma can't go together. But when it comes to trauma, I really love the trauma queen herself, Jiminica, who is on my Be Successful podcast that will be launching next year. So super excited about that. But when there is someone who has some deep trauma and has not handled it yet, usually I refer out. Because that is not my lane. And, I like to stay in my lane. So, with that said, of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, feel free to put them in the comments, or feel free to submit them anonymously. So let me pull that up really quickly while today, as you can see, I got a little bit of a late start. So just trying to get it together here. If you have not checked out my calendar, a lot of people are asking, hey, are you holding any workshops soon? Are you doing this? Are you doing any group sessions? Things like that. No. So if you want to check out my calendar, please make sure to get the latest and greatest. Please check out the calendar at velvetlipsexed.com/calendar. You can see everything that's happening. I have been slowly updating it with 2025 stuff. So please make sure you check out that calendar to see sort of what is next and what is happening. In addition, you can also always check out my free arts and science class. That's at velvetlipsexed.com/shop. And so, yeah, I feel free to get that class. It's an amazing class. Once you have this knowledge in your brain, you will be forever grateful. Believe me, it's sort of like it's like a click. It's sort of like when I took at Dark Odyssey Surrender, I took a flogging class on Florentine flogging. And when I tell y'all, I was, doing the whips and things, but it was so difficult for me to wrap my head around what this looked like. I was struggling. And so when it clicked. And it's like, oh, this is what you do. And then it was like, oh my gosh, now it can't get out of my brain, right? So with that said, my class is very much like that. Once you have this knowledge in your head and in your brain, you are going to be kind of forever grateful, because you're going to be like, oh, you're going to see people in a different light. You're going to be able to communicate better with people. So I really want this to be a TED Talk, y'all. So if you got hookups and connections, please let me know, because I do. TED Talks seems to have kind of faded, but literally, I'm like, I need this to be a TED Talk for everybody. Everybody needs to have this information, right? All right. So again, we are talking about sex after trauma. And like I said, I am not a trauma expert, but one thing I do know is that when we can feed into ourselves, or we understand what's going on, we can be more self-aware, right? So there's lots of different responses to trauma, right? We have fight, right? Which is where you want to hit somebody. We have freeze, right? Where we don't do anything, right? We just are frozen in that moment. We have fawn, where we are just fawning over that person. We have flight. So we have flight, which is where you are running away. So you have, I was watching 1,000 Pound Sisters, and one of them, I think it's Amy, is it Amy? I can't remember. Has a very much a flight response, right? Like there's something happened and there's some stuff that comes up, she's immediately like running away, right? So flight is where you are taking off. You are running away from the situation. So we have flight, we have fight, we have freeze, we have fawn. And one that Rafaela put me on, and I thought it was so beautiful, was fuck, right? So some people get into a mode of using their arousal to express, right, the trauma, or to cope with the different trauma, right? Because these are all different coping mechanisms or trauma responses, right? So thinking about, are we running away, or are you, when you're thinking about your own personal trauma and what you're experiencing, are you running away? Are you fighting, arguing, fighting, physical fighting, like all those things, getting riled up, or throwing things, right? Are you freezing, right? Not doing anything, frozen, just staying still? Are you fawning, right? You are just melting into the person who has been traumatizing you, just kind of moving, not moving in with them, but you know what I mean? Like really kind of catering to them in any kind of way. And then there's fucking, which is, having intimate relations with someone, and really understanding like, okay, this is how you're responding to what's happening to you. So, thinking about those different trauma responses are super helpful, just not only to gain self-awareness, but understanding how you can navigate that when you are thinking about how to relate this to your sexuality, right? And so it's super, super important to have that self-awareness. So again, if you've ever had any kind of a traumatic experience, make sure you get that handled, right? Make sure you are going to a therapist or counselor who can help you through that, cope with that, and give you the tools that you're able to manage that when it comes up. Because a lot of times what tends to happen is that when we are intimate with someone, we have a response. Maybe someone touches us in a way, or they do something, and that really kind of it triggers us, right? It activates us. And with that activation, it can be sort of daunting, right? So we have to figure out the tools that we need to understand, like how to navigate when this happens, right? What we know what our body does, so maybe we freeze, right? So then we check into our body. Maybe we start doing some breathing. We maybe communicate this to our lovers, right? If we have the ability to communicate, because sometimes even when you freeze, or even when you've been activated or have a trigger response, um, or trauma response, you sometimes you just can't speak, or for whatever reason. So whatever happens to you, if you cannot speak or anything like that, you need to be able to convey that communication with your lover. So being like, hey, I need to step back, or I need you to step back. And even in the moment, it's going to be difficult. And I'm not saying I'm the best at it either. So what I really believe is that, when you have a moment, so if you just, maybe your coping mechanism is freezing in the moment, and that's fine, but maybe the next day you say something, or maybe you, in the middle, you just kind of pause and be like, I need to get up, or I need to pause, or I need to take a breath, or I need to get a glass of water, whatever it is, so you can recenter and reground yourself. That is going to be sort of your best bet when it comes to understanding how you are navigating your own activation or your own trauma response, or that trigger that happened to you. And then really understanding what that trigger was, right? So maybe they said something, maybe they touched you, maybe a thought just popped into your head or came into your head that you really cannot get away from. So that can be really, really daunting, right? Hey, Susan, good morning. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you are starting this Monday off wonderfully. We are talking just around trauma and SEX after trauma, what that looks like. This November we have been, really thinking about how do we get back into it after these things happen to us, right? And so whether that's pregnancy and postpartum, whether that's you're over the age of 50, whether that's grief, whether that is trauma, all of these things can be navigated once we understand our own body's responses. So again, if you weren't here earlier, thinking about all the different activation or trauma responses, we have flight, again, where you are running away. We have freeze, where you are just freezing in place. We have fight, where you're arguing or being physical. We have fawn, where you are just kind of fawning over that person who is traumatizing you, essentially. Sort of like, what do you call that? Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, I'm falling into this. And then we also have So where you are, your arousal is activated in order to cope with the trauma. So with all of these different responses, it's just super, super helpful to know what your response is, how your response was triggered, and then convey that. If you are with a lover, to tell them like, hey, this is how I felt. This is what happened to me. This is, this is what's going on. So with that said, I think that's it. Again, if you have a question, you can always feel free to submit your question anonymously at qrco.de/lovetipsama. If you haven't got my free activity bucket list, please make sure you check that out. If you're trying to revive your love life, or it's cuffing season, you want to try something new, try something different, please check that out at bit.ly/eroticme. And then, of course, if you haven't downloaded my free class yet, please do that. It is an amazing class. All you have to do is go to velvetlipsexed.com/shop. And it is a class to get you on your way to understanding people better. And of course, if you know anybody who can hook it up with a TED Talk, I'd be glad to do that for a TED Talk. You know what I mean? Anyway, hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful Monday. Thank you all for joining me. And I have a special guest next week. So please tune in next week where I will be talking to someone. And if you have an adult brand or a business that caters to people around intimacy, I would be happy to have you and discuss what you do on the show. So please feel free to hit me up at gettips@velvetlipsexed.com, and we will get you on here. So thank you all for joining me. Have a wonderful, wonderful time this week, and I'll talk to you soon. All right. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hope you are celebrating the day of mourning. We're not celebrating, but you are grieving, right, around the day of mourning around Indigenous people and the massacre that they encountered during this time. So please keep that in your hearts and in your heads. And we'll see you next week.